You know, what is happening right now, Chuck Schumer, and I've known Chuck a long time, a long, long time. We used to get along. Actually, he'd call me asking for money for campaigns. He thought he had me trapped. Can you believe it? He really did. Thought he had control of the shutdown, the headlines, the narrative, the whole thing, folks. But something shifted overnight. And I mean, overnight his plan backfired so badly. And I am talking about a disaster here, a total disaster in a way that no strategist in Washington saw coming. And Washington's got a lot of strategists, believe me, not good ones, but they're there, the very move, and this is important. The very move he made to weaken Trump, to weaken me, has instead exposed, and this is beautiful actually, the Democrats' biggest vulnerability, their biggest problem, and it is spreading through their ranks faster than they can contain it, much, much faster. They can't stop it. By the time you finish this video, you'll understand why Schumer's worst nightmare, and he is having nightmares, I can tell you, isn't about Trump, isn't about me, but about losing the one thing Washington fears most, power. They're losing power. You know, there is this funny thing about power in Washington, and I know about power, made billions in real estate, had the #1 show on television, The Apprentice, tremendous ratings. Now I am president. People think it comes from votes or titles or committee assignments. But really, and I learned this in business, I learned this over many, many years, tremendous success in business, power comes from something much simpler. The ability to control what people believe, that is it, control the narrative, you control everything. And for decades, and we're talking decades here, Chuck Schumer mastered that game. I got to hand it to him, and I don't hand it to many people, but he was good at it. Shifty Chuck, we call him. He knew how to craft a narrative, push it through friendly media outlets, and they're very friendly to him. CNN, Mississippi, DNC. I call it MSDNC because it is like they're controlled, like North Korea, all of them, and watch it become accepted truth by the next news cycle. It was almost clockwork, like clockwork. Beautiful operation. If you are into that kind of thing, which I am not, by the way. So when the government shutdown began, and this wasn't my shutdown, this was their shutdown. Schumer had every reason to feel confident, every reason. This was supposed to be his masterstroke, his big move. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, or so he thought. Force Republicans into a corner, make them look like the obstruction, which they're not, by the way. We're the party of common sense, and watch public opinion turn against conservatives. U.S. against me, really, because it is always about Trump with these people. Frame it as Republicans playing games while Americans suffered. Americans weren't suffering because of us. Paint Trump as a villain. They always do that, always control the story. And honestly, it should have worked. That playbook had succeeded before, hadn't it? I mean, go back, think back to previous shutdowns. And there have been many, many shutdowns over the years. The party willing to hold firm usually pays a political price. That is what history shows. Public frustration builds. Moderates get nervous. Somebody blinks first, and in Washington, and I know Washington very well now, I know it better than anybody. Blinking first means losing. It is true. It is absolutely true. Schumer was counting on that pattern repeating itself. He is not very creative, by the way, uses the same playbook over and over. He figured Republicans would fracture under pressure, some would defect, others would call for compromise. Trump, meaning me, would face criticism from his own party. And I do face criticism, but not as much as they think. My party loves me, the people love me. The whole thing would collapse within days, maybe a week or two at most. That is what he thought. That is what Shifty Chuck thought, but then something unexpected happened, or rather, and this is interesting, something expected didn't happen. Republicans didn't fracture. They didn't panic. They held the line strong, very, very stronger than anyone thought. People said, sir, they call me sir, how did you get them to hold the line? I said, because they know I am right, simple as that. And more importantly, they started explaining why. And you know what? The explanation was beautiful in its simplicity. Beautiful. See, here is where Schumer's calculation went wrong. And it went very, very wrong. He assumed people would automatically blame Republicans for the shutdown because that is what usually happens. The fake news does that. They blame us for everything, raining outside, Trump's fault. But this time, and this is where it gets good, Republicans had a simple message that cut through all the noise. And believe me, there is a lot of noise, so much noise you wouldn't believe. We're asking for a clean spending bill, simple 27 pages, not 2,000 pages like they usually do. And have you seen these bills? They're like phone books. Nobody reads them. They just vote. No extra padding, no unrelated projects, just the essentials to keep government running. That is it. Very simple. My daughter, Ivanka, very smart, Wharton. She could read it in 20 minutes, 27 pages. Meanwhile, and this is crazy, Democrats were demanding trillions. Yes, you heard that right, trillions with a T. That is a lot of money, folks. In additional spending on programs that had nothing to do with keeping the lights on, nothing projects for various interest groups, and we know who these groups are, don't we? Funding for priorities that could easily wait, all attached to what should have been a straightforward continuing resolution. Straightforward, can you believe it when you put it that way? Who sounds more reasonable? Who sounds like they're playing games? Not us, not Trump. Them. Now, I want you to imagine, and this is important, this is really important, sitting at your kitchen table trying to manage your own budget. And I know about budgets. I've managed billions in my life, built an incredible company, incredible buildings. You've seen them. Trump Tower, beautiful building, best location in New York. You need to pay the electric bill, keep food on the table, maybe set aside something for prescriptions. Medicine's expensive, by the way. We're working on that. Then imagine someone telling you that before you can pay those essential bills, you also have to agree to buy a new boat, and not just any boat, a yacht, renovate the neighbor's house. And who even likes their neighbor? I am kidding. Some neighbors are great. And fund a community project 3 towns over. You'd think they were crazy, right? Absolutely crazy. That is essentially what Democrats were insisting on. And Americans started to notice smart people, great people. The American people are very smart, smarter than the media gives them credit for. Polling began shifting in ways that alarmed Democratic strategists. And they have a lot of strategists. They pay them millions, these consultants. And I saw the polls. I see all the polls. I probably look at more polls than anybody. Independents who typically blame both sides during shutdowns started putting more responsibility on Democrats. This time, working class voters, my people, I love the working class. They're incredible. They built this country, saw through the theatrics. Even some traditionally liberal voters, and there are some good ones, not many, but some, question why essential services were being held hostage for unrelated demands. Good question. The narrative Schumer had carefully constructed was crumbling like a house of cards. Like one of those, you ever see those guys who build houses of cards? One wind and boom, it is gone. And worse, he couldn't plug the holes fast enough. It was like that Dutch boy with his finger in the dam, you know, the story, except there were holes everywhere. Every press conference where he blamed Republicans just raised more questions about why Democrats wouldn't accept a clean bill. Very simple bill. 27 pages, every talking point fell flatter than the last. Flat, very, very flat, like a pancake. That is when the plan began to unravel. And that is when, and this is where I come in, Trump made his move while Schumer was busy trying to control the political narrative, which he is not very good at anymore. I got to say, he has lost his touch, probably age. He is old, very old. I was operating on a completely different level. I wasn't interested in winning news cycles. I've never been interested in that. The news is fake anyway. Why would I care? I was interested in solving actual problems, real problems for real people, real Americans. And one of the biggest problems during any government shutdown, and this makes me angry, it really does, is that military personnel don't get paid. Our warriors, our heroes, the people who defend this country, who put their lives on the line. And I rebuilt the military, by the way. Obama decimated the military. Decimated it. I came in, I rebuilt it. Strongest military we've ever had. Ever think about that for a moment. Just think about it for 1 second. Young men and women serving this country, and I love our military. They love me. I have a 98% approval rating with the military, maybe 99%. Many stationed overseas in dangerous places. Afghanistan, I got us out of Afghanistan, but we have people all over the world, many with families depending on them, suddenly facing uncertainty about their next paycheck, their rent, their mortgage, their kids' food. Not because of any military crisis or budget shortage, but because politicians in Washington, politicians like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, these people couldn't agree on spending priorities. That is not just unfortunate, folks. It is unconscionable. It is a disgrace, a total disgrace. So I did something, and people said, sir, you can't do that. I hear this a lot. Sir, you can't do that. I said, watch me, something both simple and brilliant. And people told me it was brilliant. Many people, generals, admirals, they came up to me, big, tough guys, tears in their eyes, and they said, sir, thank you for what you are doing. I directed the Pentagon. These are good people at the Pentagon. We cleaned out some bad ones, but good people now to redirect available funds to ensure military paychecks continued flowing during the shutdown. No grand announcement. No elaborate press conference. I don't need the press conferences like they do. Schumer loves press conferences. He is there every day with the little podium. I just took action, quiet, decisive action to solve a real problem for real people. That is what a president does. That is leadership, folks. Now, you might be thinking, and this is a good question, wait, can a president do that? Is that legal? And that is exactly what Democrats started asking. They became constitutional scholars overnight. Where were they when Obama was doing executive orders every day? Remember that? But suddenly they're worried about the Constitution. In fact, and this is incredible, you can't make this up, they seem more concerned about the legality of paying troops than they were about the troops not getting paid in the first place. Think about that. Can you believe this? Let that sink in. Really let it sink in. One Democratic congressman, I won't say his name, but he is a bad guy. A very bad guy, failed congressman, actually went on television, went on CNN, I think, and argued it was unconstitutional to pay the military during a shutdown. Unconstitutional to pay our troops, to pay our soldiers. Constitutional scholars might debate the finer points, and they can debate all they want, these professors who've never done anything in their lives. But to most Americans, the optics were devastating, devastating. Here were Democrats literally arguing that soldiers shouldn't be paid while Trump was making sure they got their paychecks anyway. I made sure they got paid, me, not them. They wanted our soldiers to suffer to make a political point, and that is what this was about, hurting me politically. But I wasn't going to let our soldiers suffer. No way. But this wasn't just a financial decision. It was a psychological one. And I am very good at psychology, very good. I understand people. I've been dealing with people my whole life. Negotiating, making deals, best deals. I understood something fundamental about leadership that Schumer missed, and he misses a lot, believe me. When you are in charge, people don't just want to hear you talk about problems. Talk is cheap, very cheap. They want to see you solve them. Action, they want results, not rhetoric, and I am all about results. Look at my record. Lowest unemployment ever, greatest economy ever, all before the China virus. And in that single move, one move, I demonstrated leadership while Democrats demonstrated obstruction. Total obstruction, that is all they do is obstruct. I showed people could be protected even when politicians were fighting. I proved government could still function if someone, meaning me, was willing to make it function. The symbolism was powerful, very, very powerful. People understood it immediately. While Schumer was arguing about budget points and parliamentary procedure, boring stuff. Nobody cares about that. Nobody even knows what that means. I was ensuring a soldier's rent got paid, a soldier's mortgage. A soldier's family could eat while Democrats were holding press conferences, and they love their press conferences. They live for them. I was taking care of military families. The contrast couldn't have been starker. It really couldn't. Night and day. Now here is where the optics really shifted into high gear. And I know optics. I was in television for 14 years. The Apprentice, massive hit. Headlines started appearing across news sites, social media, even some mainstream outlets that typically lean left. Way left, so far left, they're falling over. Trump ensures military pay during shutdown. Simple, direct, effective, beautiful headline. Compare that to the alternative headlines, and these are real headlines. Democrats question legality of military payments, or Schumer paying troops during shutdown may be unconstitutional. Which message do you think resonated more with the American public? Not even close. It is not even a contest. Veterans groups started speaking up, and we have the greatest veterans. I love our vets. Military families expressed gratitude, beautiful letters. I got so many letters, handwritten tears on some of them. Even people who didn't particularly like Trump personally, and some people don't. That is okay. You can't please everyone, though most people love me, had to admit this was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. And suddenly, boom, Schumer's carefully constructed narrative about Republicans causing chaos was replaced by a much simpler story, a true story, the real story. Democrats were willing to let troops go unpaid to score political points, to get back at Trump. Disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. You see, in politics, and I've learned this, I am a fast learner, very fast, high IQ. Momentum is everything. Once a narrative takes hold, it is almost impossible to dislodge. I know this, I've seen it many, many times, and the narrative that was taking hold wasn't the one Schumer wanted. Not at all. Instead of Republicans shut down government, it became Democrats block military pay. Instead of Trump causes chaos, which is what they always say, Trump's chaos, Trump's tweets, everything's chaos, it became Trump protects troops, which is true, by the way. Very true, 100% true. The media landscape and the media is the enemy of the people. I've said this many times, which Schumer had counted on to amplify his message, because the media amplifies everything for Democrats, started fracturing. Some outlets stuck to the script. Sure, the usual suspects. CNN, Mississippi, DNC, the failing New York Times, which is failing, by the way, losing subscribers every day. But others began cautiously reporting the facts. Imagine that. Facts in ways that didn't help the Democratic cause. When even friendly journalists started asking uncomfortable questions, and some of them were squirming, you could see it. That is when you know the message isn't working, not working at all. It is dying. Social media accelerated the shift, and social media is the real media now, not the fake news. Videos of Democrats refusing to vote for military pay spread rapidly, very rapidly, millions of views. Clips of Schumer's tense press conferences where his frustration was visible, very visible. He was red in the face, sweating, went viral. Memes contrasting my action with Democratic inaction filled timelines everywhere you looked. The decentralized nature of modern media. And this is why they hate social media. They can't control it. Meant Schumer couldn't control the conversation the way he once could. That world is over. Finished, done. And while Schumer was scrambling to explain, and he was scrambling, trust me, panic mode, the cracks inside his own party began to show. And folks, these weren't small cracks. These were big, beautiful cracks everywhere. You have to understand, and not many people understand this, but I understand it. The Democratic Party right now is not a unified force, not even close. It is a mess, a disaster. It is a coalition of different factions with different priorities held together more by opposition to Republicans, opposition to me. Let's be honest, it is Trump derangement syndrome than by any shared vision. They don't have a vision. What is their vision? Higher taxes, open borders. They have no message. And when pressure builds, and there's a lot of pressure now, coalitions tend to fracture. It is like a business deal that is held together by nothing but paper. First sign of trouble, it falls apart. I've seen it 1,000 times in business. The progressive wing of the party has been growing restless for years. I've watched it. AOC and the squad, I call them the squad, they hate America, in my opinion. They see the old establishment, people like Schumer, Pelosi, Crazy Nancy, I call her Biden, Sleepy Joe, as relics of a bygone era, dinosaurs. And they're not wrong about that. At least we agree on something. They want bolder action, more radical change, faster movement on their priorities, crazy priorities, but that is what they want. Defund the police. Can you believe that? Who defunds the police? They're tired of being told to wait, to compromise, to accept incremental progress. And this shutdown was revealing those tensions in real time, right before our eyes, while Schumer was trying to maintain party discipline, which is impossible with that group, like herding cats. Progressives were questioning the strategy. Why were they fighting over this particular bill? Why weren't they demanding more? Free everything for everybody. That is what they want. Why did leadership keep making compromises that satisfied no one? Behind closed doors, and I hear things, I have sources, very good sources. The whispers were getting louder, much louder, yelling. Really, some progressives were openly discussing leadership challenges. Not immediately, perhaps, but in the next election cycle, the message was clear. The younger generation was losing patience with the old guard. And when you lose the young people, you are in big trouble, big trouble. Donors were getting nervous, too. And donors run the Democratic Party, let's be honest. Not the ideological donors who would stick with Democrats through anything, the crazy ones, the true believers, but the pragmatic ones who cared about winning elections and maintaining influence. Wall Street tech billionaires, smart donors, they could see the polling, they could read the mood. And they were starting to question whether Schumer's leadership was helping or hurting. That is a big question, a very important question. And the answer was hurting badly for the first time in his career. And I mean, the first time he has been in politics for like 50 years. Chuck Schumer wasn't just managing external pressure from Republicans, from me. He was dealing with internal revolt from his own party, a revolt, a mutiny. He wasn't dictating the story anymore. He was reacting to it, defense mode. And in politics, once you are on defense, it is incredibly hard to regain the initiative. I know this. I've seen it happen to so many people. Jeb Bush, remember, please clap. Once you lose that momentum, it is very, very hard to get it back, almost impossible. But internal revolt wasn't his only problem. Oh no, public trust was collapsing too, collapsing like a building. Let's talk about numbers for a moment, and I love numbers. I am very good with numbers because numbers tell stories that words sometimes can't. Numbers don't lie, people lie, but numbers don't lie. My approval rating had been climbing steadily since taking office for my second term. And the fake news doesn't want to report this, but it is true. We're talking about ratings in the mid to upper 50% range. Some polls say 60%. Great numbers, numbers that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago when the fake news was attacking me 24/7. Russia, 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 impeachment, all nonsense. More importantly, and this is important, those numbers were higher than Obama's were at the same point in his presidency. Much higher, higher than Bush's, higher than most modern presidents, higher than Reagan's. Maybe people said it couldn't be done. Sir, the media is against you. You'll never get above 40%. I did it. I proved them wrong. Meanwhile, Democratic approval was sinking like a stone, like the Titanic. National polls showed the party's favorability somewhere in the 20s to low 30s range. That is not just bad. That is historically terrible. Terrible numbers, worst numbers ever, probably. We're talking about approval numbers that signal deep public dissatisfaction with the party's direction, message, and leadership, everything. But here is what really worried Democratic strategists, and they were very worried, I can tell you. They were in panic mode, the demographic breakdown, the numbers within the numbers. The groups that had reliably voted blue for decades were shifting, moving away, walking away. Working class Latino voters, particularly men, and Latino men love Trump, I got to say. They really do. Hardworking people were moving toward Republicans in numbers that should have been impossible according to traditional political models. Impossible. But it happened. It is happening. We won 46% of Latino men in some areas. Nobody's ever done that, ever. Younger voters, especially Gen Z men. And these are kids who grew up with the internet, with social media, weren't following the expected pattern of becoming more liberal. Nope. Instead, they were responding to populist America, first messaging in ways that defied conventional wisdom. Our messaging, because young people want jobs, they want to afford houses, they don't want lectures about pronouns. The coalition that had powered Democratic victories was fracturing, and nobody in party leadership seemed to have a plan to stop it. No plan whatsoever. They were lost, confused. And while Schumer was scrambling, I was winning big league. Think about it from the perspective of an average working American. Think about this. Maybe you are a union member in Michigan. Great state. I won Michigan twice. Beautiful state. Or a small business owner in Arizona, or a retired veteran in North Carolina. What message were Democrats offering you? What were they saying? Higher taxes to fund programs for people who entered the country illegally, illegal immigrants. They want to give them everything: health care, education, voting rights, lectures about privilege and systemic issues. Woke nonsense. You are a racist. You are this. You are that. Policies that seem more concerned with international affairs than your own community, your own family, Ukraine. This Ukraine that, what about Ohio? Meanwhile, Republicans, my Republicans, the MAGA Republicans, were talking about secure borders, very secure borders. The wall. We built hundreds of miles of wall. Best wall ever built, bringing manufacturing jobs back. We brought back so many jobs, car companies, factories, standing up to China. I am the only one who is tough on China, protecting American workers first, Simple messages, clear priorities, easy to understand and relate to. America first, it is not complicated, it is common sense. And when that government shutdown happened, it crystallized the choice, crystal clear. Democrats were willing to shut everything down unless they got funding for their wish list, their crazy wish list. Republicans were saying, let's pass a clean bill and keep things running. 27 pages, which approach sounds more focused on ordinary Americans. The answer is obvious, very obvious. Even a child could see it. The political tide was turning faster than anyone could sandbag it. And just when Democrats thought it couldn't get worse and they thought it was already pretty bad, they were depressed, it did. It got much, much worse, so much worse. You know, there's an old saying in politics, and I know all the sayings, when you've lost the media, you've lost everything. And I'm not talking about conservative media or alternative outlets. Fox News loves me, Newsmax, they're great. I am talking about the mainstream networks and publications that had faithfully echoed Democratic talking points for years. For decades, the fake news, the outlets that could be counted on to frame stories in the most favorable light possible for Democrats, spin everything, even they were starting to crack, starting to be a little bit fair, which is all I ever asked for. I don't need them to love me. Just be fair. It started subtly, a headline here or there that was slightly less favorable to Democrats, a news segment that presented both sides more evenly. Imagine that, both sides, what a concept, journalists asking Democrats tougher questions during interviews. Real questions, not softball questions, nothing dramatic at first, just a gradual shift in tone and approach, but gradual accelerated into something more significant, much more significant. A landslide, some outlets began cautiously admitting that maybe, just maybe, and they were nervous saying this, the Democratic strategy on the shutdown wasn't working. Maybe Trump had a point, maybe Trump was right. Some reporters started acknowledging that tying essential government funding to controversial spending priorities might not have been the smartest move, not smart at all. Dumb, actually. Even the networks that used to echo every talking point started to go quiet. CNN went quiet. Can you believe that? And in media, silence speaks volumes, big, big volumes. Why was this happening? Good question. Well, journalists aren't stupid. Some of them are, but not all. They can read polls, same as anyone else. They can sense when public opinion is shifting like wind. And they know that if they're too far out of step with their audience, they lose credibility, they lose viewers, they lose relevance, and then they lose their jobs. That is what they care about, jobs. We're living in an era where trust in traditional media is at historic lows, and I've been saying this for years. Fake news, enemy of the people. Numbers show public confidence in major news organizations somewhere between the low 20s to mid 30% range. Terrible. That is catastrophic for an industry that depends on being seen as trustworthy and authoritative, but they did it to themselves with the lies, the Russia hoax, all of it. So when a story isn't resonating, when the narrative they're pushing is clearly failing badly, some journalists start to pull back, self-preservation, not out of any principled stand necessarily. They don't have principles, but out of self-preservation. They don't want to go down with a sinking ship. And the ship was definitely sinking, big, beautiful Titanic-style sinking, glug, glug, glug ratings for shows that spend all their time defending Democratic positions were declining, way down. Rachel Maddow down, Lemon fired, actually. Subscriptions were dropping, people canceling, audiences were tuning out, nobody was watching. Meanwhile, alternative media sources, podcasts, independent journalists, social media personalities, Joe Rogan, these people were gaining ground by simply presenting information and letting people make up their own minds. What a concept. When the echo chamber falls silent, that is when panic sets in, real panic. And panic was exactly what started showing in Chuck Schumer's public appearances. Total panic if you watched his press conferences during this period. And I watched them. They were hard to watch, honestly. You could see the change in real time. The polished, controlled Senate Majority Leader was replaced by someone visibly frustrated, increasingly defensive, struggling to maintain composure, losing it. He started snapping at reporters who asked reasonable questions, very reasonable questions. Why won't you let troops get paid? Snap. His answers became longer, more convoluted, full of justifications and explanations that raised more questions than they answered. Word salad, like Kamala Harris. The body language told the story. And I am very good at reading body language, very good. Crossed arms, tight jaw, eyes that darted around, looking for escape routes, looking for the door. This wasn't the demeanor of someone winning. This was someone watching their strategy collapse and not knowing how to stop it, couldn't stop it. A loser. There is a fascinating psychological dynamic that happens when a leader starts losing control. And I've studied this. I know about this. People can sense it. It is almost primal, like animals sense fear. I've seen it in business many, many times. When you are confident and in command, and I am always confident, it shows in everything you do, your posture, your tone, your willingness to engage strong. People respect strength. But when you are defensive and uncertain, weak, that shows too. And once people pick up on that weakness, it is almost impossible to put the genie back in the bottle. Once it is out, it is out. Schumer had built his career on projecting strength and control. Tough guy. He was the master tactician, the strategic genius who always had a plan. So he thought, but now the plan wasn't working, and everyone could see it. Everyone, his press conferences became exercises in damage control rather than message amplification, putting out fires. Reporters started asking, and these were good questions, why he wouldn't allow a vote on a clean continuing resolution. Good question. Why was he holding military pay hostage? Another great question. Why weren't Democrats willing to negotiate? These are reasonable questions, and his answers filled with references to Republican obstruction and procedural concerns. The parliamentarian said, just didn't land. Nobody cares about the parliamentarian. They sounded like excuses because they were excuses, making excuses. Compare that to my messaging during the same period. Night and day, short, direct, confident. We're keeping the military paid. We're standing firm on fiscal responsibility. We're putting America first. No elaborate explanations needed, no defensive posturing, no whining, just clarity in action. That is how you do it. That is leadership, folks. Now, political weakness isn't just about polls or press conferences. It is about perception, and perception is reality in politics. Once the perception takes hold that a leader is losing control, it becomes self-fulfilling. I've seen it happen. It happened to Jeb Bush. Low energy Jeb. It happened to Hillary. Crooked Hillary. People start positioning themselves accordingly, jumping ship. Allies become less vocal in their support. Critics become more bold, more aggressive. The whole ecosystem shifts, and perception, once lost, is almost impossible to regain. Almost impossible. You can't speech your way out of a perception problem. You can't poll test your way back to credibility. I could hire every consultant in Washington and they charge millions. Won't help. The only way to rebuild is through consistent action over time. Results, wins, but Schumer didn't have time. Clock was ticking. Events were moving too fast. His own senators were getting nervous calls from constituents. People yelling. Town halls were getting contentious, very contentious. Protesters. The pressure was building from below like a volcano. And leadership, weak leadership, wasn't providing clear direction from above. That is a recipe for chaos in any organization, whether it is a business, a military unit, or a political party. Total chaos, disaster. But this wasn't just about one senator or one shutdown or even one political moment. This wasn't small when you zoom out, and sometimes you have to zoom out to see the big picture, the whole picture. You start to see something much bigger happening, much, much bigger, historic. The Democratic Party was facing structural problems that went far deeper than any single leader could fix. Deep, deep problems, foundation problems for decades, and we're talking many decades. Democrats had built their coalition on certain assumptions, bad assumptions, wrong assumptions, that working class Americans would naturally side with the party claiming to represent workers, the party of the working man. They said wrong. Those workers voted for me. That minority communities would remain reliably blue forever and ever. Wrong again. That the future belonged to urban, educated, multicultural voters. The elites. Wrong on all counts. Every single one of those assumptions, every one, was being challenged, destroyed. The coalition was fracturing along unexpected lines, and party leadership seemed genuinely confused about how to respond. Deer in headlights. They had no idea what to do, still don't. Part of the problem was generational. And this is a big problem. The leaders running the party were in their 70s and 80s. Ancient, some of them should be retired. Trying to connect with voters in their 20s and 30s. The cultural gap was enormous, huge. You could drive a truck through it. The priorities were different. The communication styles didn't match. They don't even speak the same language. The very language they used felt outdated because it was outdated from a different era. Younger Democrats didn't relate to the old guard anymore. Not at all. They didn't remember the Cold War. And the Cold War was important. We won, Reagan won, or the Clinton years, or any of the formative experiences that shaped their leaders' worldviews. Different generation entirely. They grew up in a completely different America with different challenges, different technologies, different ways of understanding the world, internet, social media, everything's different. And when these younger voters looked at their party's leadership, they saw people who seemed out of touch, way out of touch, completely disconnected. Like they were speaking a foreign language. Watching Schumer or Pelosi or Biden try to connect with Gen Z voters was sometimes painful, very painful, cringeworthy. They call it the references didn't land. Here is the deal. Nobody knows what that means. The jokes fell flat, flat as a pancake. The whole dynamic felt awkward and forced, very forced. Like watching your grandfather try to use TikTok meanwhile, and this is important, a Republican message was resonating across generational lines in unexpected ways. My message, our message, MAGA, why? Great question, because it was simple, direct, and focused on concrete issues people actually cared about: jobs, safety, fairness, strength, real things. These aren't complicated concepts that require elite education to understand. You don't need a degree from Harvard. They're universal human concerns, human nature. People want to be safe. They want jobs. They want to be treated fairly. Simple. The party that once sold hope and change, remember Obama, was now struggling to sell coherence. They can't even put a sentence together. Their message was fragmented, their priorities unclear, their leadership aging, and increasingly disconnected from the base they claim to represent, disconnected completely. Meanwhile, Trump's movement, my movement, the MAGA movement, kept expanding, growing, getting bigger and bigger, and not just politically. This was bigger than politics. This is where things get really interesting, and this is the most important part, because what we were witnessing wasn't just a political realignment, not just an election. It was a cultural shift that went much deeper than party labels or election cycles, much, much deeper. Cultural revolution. Think about what Trump represents to millions of Americans, what I represent. Not the man himself necessarily, although I am a pretty good representative, I must say, but what he symbolized, what I symbolize: a fighter, a winner. I was the guy who didn't talk like a politician. I talked like a normal person. I am a businessman who didn't pretend to be something he wasn't. What you see is what you get. Who said what he thought and did what he said, keep promises. Who fought back when attacked instead of apologizing. Never apologize when you were right. They hit me. I hit back harder. Who put America's interests first without embarrassment or qualification. No apologies. America first always. Not America second, not America last. First, that resonated and resonated strongly with people who felt like they had been managed, manipulated, and talked down to by establishment politicians for decades, for too long, for their whole lives. People who were tired of carefully crafted messages that said nothing. Political speak, nothing. Tired of leaders who seem more concerned with international opinion. What does France think? What does Germany think than their own citizens' well-being? Take care of America first. Tired of being told their concerns were illegitimate or their values were outdated. You are deplorable. Deplorables, they call them. Remember that. Hillary called them deplorables. That cost her the election. This movement was about more than tax policy or immigration enforcement or any single issue. Much more, it was about authenticity versus performance, real versus fake, about results versus rhetoric, numbers don't lie, about empowerment versus management, freedom. And once that cultural shift takes hold, it is almost impossible to reverse through conventional political tactics. Can't be done. Can't put the genie back in the bottle. You saw it, and I saw it. I see everything in how people talked about politics in their daily lives. The quiet conversations at diners and barbershops and church socials. Real America, the things people said when they thought no one was listening. I like Trump, they'd whisper it. I am voting for Trump. They were afraid to say it out loud because of the media, because of the backlash, but they said it in the voting booth. That is why polls were wrong. There was a hunger, a real hunger for leaders who actually led, who took responsibility, who made decisions and stood by them, strong decisions. The old model of politics, carefully poll-tested messages delivered by focus group candidates who never said anything controversial, wasn't working anymore. Finished, people could smell the inauthenticity a mile away. Fake. They wanted real, even if real was rough around the edges, even if real sent mean tweets, and I am real. Very real. This isn't just about one election or one political cycle. This is historic. It is a societal realignment, and those don't happen often. Maybe once or twice in a generation. FDR did it, Reagan did it, I am doing it, but when they do, they reshape everything. Everything changes. Think back to other major realignments in American history. You go back, look at history. The New Deal era, FDR, great president, built a coalition that lasted 50 years. The Reagan Revolution, I love Reagan, met him several times, great man, great president. These weren't just political victories, they were fundamental shifts in how Americans thought about government, about society, about their own role in the democratic process. They lasted for decades and defined entire eras. Important moments in history, textbook stuff. We're living through one of those moments right now. And what is driving it isn't Trump himself necessarily, although I am driving a lot of it. Let's be honest, I am the face of it. But what I unleashed, a demand for authenticity, for action, for leaders who serve the people rather than managing them, serve, not manage. Work for the people, and that right there is what keeps Schumer awake at night, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, because he built his career in the old system. The swamp, he mastered the old rules. He knew how to play the old game, the old corrupt game. But the game has changed, and he doesn't know how to adapt, can't adapt, too old, too set in his ways. Too much a creature of the swamp, and that is his problem. That is his nightmare. Let's talk about power for a moment. And I know about power because understanding power is key to understanding what is happening. I understand power. I've had power in business, billions of dollars, power in television, #1 show, power in politics, President of the United States, most powerful position in the world. In the old model, political power came from controlling institutions. The swamp controlled the Senate. You control legislation, control the media narrative, you control public opinion, control the party apparatus. You control who gets nominated and who gets resources. The machine, the swamp, Schumer understood that model intimately. He lived it. He knew how to work the levers of institutional power, typical politician, typical swamp creature. He could make or break careers through committee assignments. He could shape legislation through procedural maneuvering, boring stuff, nobody cares. He could coordinate messaging across the Democratic caucus and friendly media outlets. The usual playbook, email blast, talking points. Everybody says the same thing, coordinated, but here's what he didn't fully grasp. And this is important, this is key. Institutional power matters a lot less when people stop trusting institutions. And that is what happened. America's trust in institutions has been declining for years. Down, 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 trust in Congress. Nobody trusts Congress. They have like 10% approval, disgraceful. In media, fake news, enemy of the people, in political parties, in government generally, all at historic lows, the lowest ever probably. When that happens, the old power structures start to crumble, they fall apart. Like sand, controlling the Senate means less when people see the Senate as dysfunctional, which it is broken. Shaping the media narrative means less when people don't trust the media. Fake news, nobody believes them anymore. Party discipline means less when voters identify less with parties. People don't call themselves Democrats or Republicans anymore. They call themselves Americans, or they call themselves MAGA. It is like trying to plug a dam with a paperclip. You might temporarily stop one leak, but the pressure behind the dam keeps building. And if boom, catastrophic failure, that is what Democrats were experiencing. That is what Schumer was experiencing. They still had institutional power. They controlled the Senate, after all, thin majority, but they had it. They still had media allies, CNN, Mississippi DNC, all of them, and financial resources, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and organizational infrastructure, all the advantages, supposedly, but none of it seemed to matter as much as it used to. The ground was shifting beneath their feet. Major shift, earthquake. And when your strategy depends on institutional control, but institutions are losing legitimacy, nobody believes in them anymore, what do? Good question. Great question. Schumer didn't have a good answer to that question. Still doesn't. Neither did most Democratic leaders. They kept trying the same tactics that had worked before, the same playbook from the 1990s, not realizing that the landscape had fundamentally changed. Everything changed. New world, even traditional allies started distancing themselves to protect their own futures. Smart move, actually, survival instinct. Some Democratic senators began quietly signaling that they weren't entirely on board with leadership shutdown strategy, wavering, hedging their bets. Some media figures started hedging their coverage. Well, maybe Trump has a point here. Some donors started diversifying their political portfolios, spreading money around. Nobody wanted to be too closely associated with a losing strategy that is human nature. When the ship starts taking on water, people start looking for lifeboats. They jump ship. Rats leaving a sinking ship. By the time the dust settles, this won't just be a political loss. It'll be a paradigm shift, big shift, historic shift. Future political scientists, and these are smart people, professors, will look back at this period and recognize it as a turning point, a major turning point, not because of any single event, but because of what all these events revealed about the changing nature of American politics and society. Everything, the old bargains no longer hold. The old coalitions have fractured, shattered. The old messages don't resonate, don't work. The old leaders are struggling to adapt, can't adapt, dinosaurs, and into that vacuum, new movements and new voices are emerging. My movement, our movement, MAGA, the people's movement, this is what creative destruction looks like in politics. And I know about creative destruction, did it in real estate many times, knocked down old buildings, build beautiful new ones. It is messy. It is uncomfortable. It challenges long-held assumptions and disrupts established patterns. Disruptor, they call me. But it is also how systems renew themselves, how new possibilities emerge, how genuine change happens, real change, not Obama's fake change. Remember, hope and change. What a joke. So what happens next? That is the question everyone's asking. Great question everybody wants to know. Will Democrats reform, or will new leaders rise from their ashes? Will Republicans maintain unity or fracture under success? Will Trump's movement, my movement, the MAGA movement, outlast Trump himself? I think it will. By the way, will the cultural realignment continue or reverse? Will we keep winning? Nobody knows for certain. I have some ideas. I have a lot of ideas, actually, very good ideas, but nobody knows exactly. History is contingent. Things happen. Small decisions can have enormous consequences. Unexpected events can change everything overnight. Black swan events, but we can see the trajectories, the momentum, the underlying forces at work. We can see where this is going, and it is going in our direction. If Democrats continue down their current path, and they probably will because they're stubborn, defending institutional prerogatives, doubling down on unpopular positions, refusing to acknowledge their coalition is fractured, they'll likely face more losses ahead, many more losses, 2024, 2026, 2028. Not just in elections, but in relevance and influence. They'll become irrelevant, a regional party, California and New York. That is it. If they're willing to genuinely reform, and I don't think they are, rethink their message, elevate new leaders, reconnect with working Americans, focus on concrete problems rather than abstract ideologies, pronouns, and woke stuff, which they won't do, but if they did, they might rebuild. Might, but reform is hard, very painful. It requires admitting mistakes, and politicians never admit mistakes, challenging orthodoxies, and they're very orthodox, and empowering people who might threaten the current leadership, AOC challenging Schumer. Never happened. Can't get complacent, can't get lazy. Unity during opposition can fracture when you are in power and have to make actual governing decisions. When you have to deliver the coalition I built, and I built a great coalition, maybe the best coalition ever, blacks, Hispanics, young people, working people. Everybody is powerful, but also fragile in some ways. Held together by shared opposition, more than shared vision. We have to maintain it. We have to deliver. The question is whether Republicans can translate electoral success into lasting institutional change. And that is the big question. Can we actually drain the swamp, or will we just become part of it? I am draining the swamp. I've been draining it since day one, but will others? Can we maintain the outsider energy, the MAGA energy that fueled our rise while wielding insider power? Can we stay hungry? Can we deliver for the voters who trusted us? Great people who trusted me, who believed in me. These aren't easy questions, but they're the right questions, because what we're witnessing isn't the end of a shutdown. It is the beginning of a realignment, a major realignment, the kind that happens once in a lifetime, and how that realignment unfolds will shape American politics for decades to come, for a long time, for generations. And the irony is, and this is the beautiful irony, the beautiful part of all this, Schumer himself triggered it. He did this to himself. Not intentionally, of course. He is not that smart. He thought he was executing a clever tactical maneuver to put pressure on Republicans, to put pressure on me, to hurt Trump, to make me look bad. Instead, and this is the funny part, he exposed all the fault lines in his own party, revealed the weakness of his own position, and accelerated trends that were already undermining Democratic power. He destroyed himself. He destroyed his own party, own goal. They call it in soccer, shot himself in the foot. Sometimes in politics, and I've seen this many times, the thing you do to strengthen your position actually weakens it. Backfire. The move you make to expose your opponent's vulnerability ends up exposing your own weakness. The narrative you try to control ends up controlling you, loses control of you. That is what happened here. And now Schumer has to live with the consequences. He has to live with what he did, what he caused, his legacy, and legacy is important. Everybody thinks about their legacy, which might have been as a skilled legislative tactician who served his party for decades, will instead be tied to this moment of miscalculation. This disaster, this massive failure, to the shutdown that backfired, to the realignment he accidentally accelerated, not the legacy he wanted. I can tell you that not at all. He'll be remembered as the guy who destroyed the Democratic Party. That is his legacy now. Power shifts when ordinary people stop buying the illusion, and I've been saying this, and Americans have stopped buying the illusion that Washington works for them. They know it doesn't. They've stopped buying the illusion that media tells them the truth. Fake news. They've stopped buying the illusion that political parties represent their interests. The swamp. That is actually a healthy development in a democracy, very healthy, when people become skeptical of power, when they demand more from their leaders, when they refuse to accept empty rhetoric as a substitute for real action. That is when genuine accountability becomes possible. That is democracy, real democracy. It is uncomfortable for those who benefited from the old system, the elites, the swamp. It is disruptive for institutions that depended on public deference. But it is ultimately how democratic systems stay vibrant and responsive, how they survive. We're living through that disruption right now. And yes, it is messy, it is contentious, it sometimes feels chaotic, but it is also how change happens, how new possibilities emerge, how power genuinely shifts from the few to the many, from the elites to the people, from the swamp to Main Street. Now, if this breakdown made sense to you, if you are seeing the same shift happening across America, and I know you are smart people, I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. Share your perspective, and let's keep this conversation alive. Let's keep winning. Make sure you are subscribed, because what is coming next could redefine America as we know it. We're going to make America greater than ever before. Greater than ever. Stay sharp, stay curious, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much. Thank you. God bless America.